2 minutes here, so if anybody needs a last restroom break for now, I mean, you're welcome to take breaks throughout the meeting, but we'll get started very shortly. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Saujanya Jamboni, and I'm with the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research here at the FDA, and I'm with the Office of Strategic Programs. And on behalf of all of my FDA colleagues here, we'd like to welcome you all to the DC metro area, for those of you that traveled outside of the metro area, and for all of our local neighbors, thank you for coming to our 19th patient-focused drug development meeting on neuropathic pain associated with peripheral neuropathy. We have a really great day of discussion ahead, and what I'd like to do is just go over a few housekeeping items, go over the agenda, and then we'll get started. So, next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to start off with some presentations from my FDA colleagues. They'll provide an overview of the FDA's patient-focused drug development initiative, some background comments on neuropathic pain and therapeutic options. We'll have a presentation on clinical trial endpoints, and then I'll come back and go over the discussion format for the day. So, as you know, we have two topics today for today's discussion. Topic 1 is on disease symptoms and daily impacts that matter most to patients. So we'll have a panel discussion followed by a larger group facilitated discussion. And then we'll take a break, we'll come back, and we'll do the same thing for topic 2, which is on patient perspectives on current treatment options. So again, we'll do the same thing. We'll have a panel discussion followed by a group discussion, and that'll take us to the last half hour of the day, which we reserve for open public comment. Open public comment is a time for anybody in the room, not just patients or caregivers, but others in the room to share some comments that come to mind. So we have sign up for open public comment out on the registration desk. I believe we've already had several people sign up for it. We'll take sign up through break time, and we'll see how many people signed up and how much time each speaker will have. And then we'll wrap up the day with closing remarks from my FDA colleagues. And so you can see it's a pretty packed agenda, but it'll be a really, really great day of listening to you and definitely learning from you. So thank you for being here. So what I'd like to do is quickly do a round of introductions. If I could turn to my FDA colleagues here, and if you could please state your name and your office.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Eggers. I'm in the Office of Program and Strategic Analysis here in FDA.
Hi, I'm Sharon Hertz. I am currently the Director for the Division of Anesthesia, Analgesia, and Addiction Products here at CEDAR. Hi, I'm Pamela Horn, and I'm a clinical team leader in the same division.
Hi, I'm Stephen Galati. I'm also a clinical reviewer from the same division.
Hi, Nikunj Patel. I'm a clinical outcome assessment reviewer in the Office of New Drugs.
Hello, I'm Mary Parks. I'm Deputy Director in the Office of Drug Evaluation 2.
Thank you. And then I'm going to turn to my colleagues to my right.
Graham Thompson, Cedar.
Shannon Woodward, Cedar.
Great. And we have a few others that are floating around, and they are Yuande and Meghna, so you'll see them throughout the room too. And so just a few last-minute housekeeping items. Bathrooms are back out into the lobby area. If you go down to where that registration desk is and make a right and go all the way to the end of the hallway, you'll see bathrooms there. And there's also a kiosk out there that sells basic sandwiches and snacks and drinks. So this is definitely a more informal, I want you to feel very comfortable to be here. So if you need to get up to have a snack break, to have a stretch break, bathroom break, whatever it is, please feel free to do so. We want you to be as comfortable as possible. And last but not least, this meeting is being recorded and transcribed, and just about a week after the meeting, the recording and the transcript will be posted onto the meeting webpage. Okay, so with that, I would like to turn it over to Pamela for opening remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the meeting on patient-focused drug development for neuropathic pain associated with peripheral neuropathy. As I just said, I'm Dr. Pamela Horn, clinical team leader in the Division of Anesthesia, Analgesia, and Addiction Products, and that's in the Office of New Drugs at FDA. Our division reviews drugs for the management and treatment of pain, including neuropathic pain. So we're happy to see so many patients, caregivers, and advocates in the audience today. I understand that we also have a lot more of you joining us remotely on the web, and I want to thank you all for being a part of this meeting and sharing your experiences with us. We're excited for this opportunity to engage directly with all of you. In our discussion today, we will be focusing on the symptoms that matter most, the impact that neuropathic pain has on your daily lives, and what factors you take into account when selecting a treatment. We understand that neuropathic pain associated with peripheral neuropathy is a serious condition with physical, emotional, and social impacts, and that there is an unmet need for treatment for patients. Dr. Stephen Galati from our division will provide a bit more background in a few minutes on neuropathic pain associated with peripheral neuropathy and the current treatment options. It is FDA's responsibility to ensure that the benefits of a drug outweigh its risks. Therefore, having this kind of dialogue is extremely important and valuable for us because hearing what patients care about can help lead us in figuring out how to best facilitate drug development for neuropathic pain and understand how patients view the benefits and the risks of treatment for neuropathic pain. So I know that we also have representation from industry, from academia, and some healthcare professionals today. And while FDA plays a critical role in drug development, we're just one part of the process, and I'm glad to see a high level of interest from those of you who also play an important part of the drug development process. FDA protects and promotes public health by evaluating the safety, effectiveness, and quality of new drugs, but we do not develop drugs or conduct the clinical trials ourselves. Drug companies, sometimes working with researchers or patient communities, are the ones who conduct trials and submit applications for new drugs to FDA. It is then FDA's responsibility to ensure that the benefits of a drug outweigh its risks. This benefit-risk decision-making is an integral part of our review process. We look forward to incorporating what we learned today from all of you into the agency's thinking and understanding of how patients view benefits and risks of treatments for neuropathic pain. Once again, we are all here today to hear the voice of the patient. So thank you for your participation. We're grateful to each of you for coming to share your experiences, your personal stories, and your perspectives. I'll now turn it over to Sarah Eggers, who will provide background on the FDA's Patient-Focused Drug Development Initiative.
Thank you, Pamela. And welcome. I am happy to tell you a little bit more about the initiative that brings us all together today under this large umbrella we call Patient-Focused Drug Development Initiative. This initiative is something that has stemmed out of years of conversation and a growing awareness that by FDA that the use in having a more systematic way of gathering patient input and perspective on their condition and available treatment options, you and your caretakers as the experts of what it's like to live with your disease. It helps inform our understanding of the context for the benefit risk assessment and decision making for new drugs, as Pamela mentioned. It can also, as she mentioned, help inform our oversight and advice during drug development and review of the marketing applications of drugs that want to go on the market. Patient-focused drug development is a program that came out of a commitment FDA made as part of the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, or PDUFA 5, which is a series of commitments that we make to advance drug development, drug review, and FDA's role in that. As part of that commitment, we are convening more than 20 public meetings on specific disease areas over a 5-year period. As Saujanya mentioned, this is the 19th meeting, so we have learned a lot from the meetings that we've conducted, and we continue to learn as we go along this journey. We hope that the meetings will help develop a systematic approach to gathering patient input. What we're learning from you can help translate to how we engage with patients and caretakers and advocates and other stakeholders in the future. In the selection in the identification of the meetings, we went through both a public process and an internal look at the areas disease areas where a meeting would be extremely helpful. We announced a preliminary set of meetings approximately 5 years ago now and collected input on the nominations for the meetings. And we have reviewed the public comments and all the input we received to come up with a final set of 24 meetings that would be the focus of our efforts for this 5-year period. And here you have the meetings that we have conducted. You can see since 2013, we have conducted meetings on a range of conditions, a range of severity, a range of the types of populations they have that they mean, and in the challenges that the patient communities face. Now, we've learned a lot of similarities across these disease areas, and so what we hear from you will help build on. Not only will we learn more about what it's like with your condition at this time, but we are building on what we're learning from others in their conditions as well. Each meeting, these meetings are quite unique for a public meeting at FDA, and I gather elsewhere as well. As Saujanya mentioned, they are designed specifically to listen to patients and their caretakers and hear your input. We focus on a set of questions, as she mentioned, that elicit patients' perspectives on the disease and treatment approaches. And we have a general set of questions that we build upon and tailor as needed to the type of meeting that we're having and the topics that were most important to our review colleagues and others today. We have learned through this meeting that active patient involvement and participation is a key to the success of this meeting, and we want to thank anyone who has spread the word about the meeting, who has helped engage with patients or caretakers in helping them navigate through FDA and getting here and all of the other things that it takes to come here on a Friday afternoon. So we thank stakeholders, advocates, and you, patients, and your families as well. Following each meeting, we publish a Voice of the Patient report that summarizes what we hear today and what we learn from the folks on the webcast and what we learn from those of you that we hope will continue the discussion through our docket process, which Saujanya will describe in a few minutes. We try to capture in these reports your words and your thoughts in a way that is most accessible for our FDA colleagues to understand your perspectives and your experiences. They do serve an important function in communicating to our colleagues here at FDA, but also we hope as a resource for you as you continue to engage with yourselves as patient communities or engage with others throughout the drug development process. We believe that the long-run impact of this program will be a better and more informed understanding of how we all might find ways to develop new treatments for these diseases. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Stephen to give a bit more background on peripheral neuropathy.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So I'm Stephen Galati. I'm a medical reviewer in the division of DAP. And what I'm going to do today is go over very briefly what peripheral neuropathic pain is. It's a very complex issue, but I'll keep it simple and brief for today. So peripheral neuropathy is, and then the pain associated with it, is associated with damage to the actual nerves themselves. And what we refer to peripheral nerves, we think of the central nervous system as the brain and the spinal cord. The nerves that come out from the rest of the body, that would be the peripheral nerves. And we all have sensed pain in our lives, whether we have peripheral neuropathic pain or just living our lives. So for example, pain can actually be adaptive. If you put your hand on a stove and you feel the heat, your body then signals that there's damage going on to your tissues. You then pull away. That's an adaptive, appropriate response. But people who suffer from peripheral neuropathic pain, the damage itself is to the nerve, not to that tissue. And it falls underneath chronic pain. And chronic pain is exactly how it sounds. It's been going on for a specific period of time. And we divide it into different descriptors. So you may or may not have heard of nociceptive pain. And nociceptive pain would be, for example, you break a bone. And in the bone, the injury is to the bone, to the tissue. And then those nerves will then sense that there is injury or inflammation to the brain. And then you can react, or you can go to your physician, or however we're meant to respond. When there's neuropathic pain, the lesion is not in the bone, it's in the nerve going to the bone. And that's what causes an abnormal function, so people who will have pain without a stimulus. So you may just be sitting there in bed and feel pain. That's why it's happening. It's because it's a damage to the nerve itself. And like I said, peripheral is because it's in the peripheral nervous system, so it's outside of the brain and spinal cord. So how does this get diagnosed? So those of you who suffer from peripheral neuropathic pain know that you go through certain procedures. Usually you go to your primary care physician. And although peripheral neuropathy is associated with a number of different symptoms, pain is one of the main complaints because of the discomfort. So you go to usually your primary care physician, for example, and they may initiate a treatment or workup, but often it can be referred to a specialist. Neurologists typically are specialists that see these referrals. It also can be a rehabilitative doctor. And then some number of different tests in addition to a physical exam can be performed. Those of you who may recognize some of these terms, so a nerve conduction velocity, that measures the speed of the nerve, EMG, which is when they stick the needle into the muscle fiber to see if it's firing appropriately. Lab tests are often done. For example, can test for different types of infection, can check for blood sugars because diabetes can be associated with this, and many other studies. And they may even go to a nerve biopsy where they may take a piece of the nerve and send it off to a pathologist to look at it under a microscope. So based on this combination of symptoms, history, and physical examination, and any other tests that were needed, a physician can come to a determination as to cause of the peripheral neuropathic pain. Now here's a list of a number of neuropathic pain syndromes that deal with neuropathic pain, and the most common tends to be painful diabetic neuropathy. And the reason why that's the most common is because diabetes is so prevalent. And as you can see, 10 to 20% of diabetic patients may have peripheral neuropathic pain. And that's a pretty large number. But there's also a number of other causes, and this just lists some of the main ones, but there are others. And it can cause some other infections, it can cause some trauma, cause some other drugs, it can be induced by substances such as alcohol, cancers, and even autoimmune disorders. So despite all the numerous causes of peripheral neuropathic pain, the symptoms tend to be similar. And pain, of course, is a big portion of the neuropathic symptoms. But common symptoms that people might suffer from would be burning sensation, shock-like pain, numbness and tingling, and it could be a combination of these symptoms. It's not usually just one. There's some other terms such as allodynia, and what allodynia is would be described as something that's normally painless can induce pain in people who have peripheral neuropathic pain. An example would be if you're in bed and you rub your foot or your hand across a sheet, all of a sudden that might induce pain. Hyperalgesia is another term where you may have increased sensitivity to a normal painful response. For example, if you were getting an IV or you're giving a blood draw, that's normally uncomfortable for the average person, but these patients may have an extreme response to that where it's even more painful. So although this is beyond the scope of the talk, because we're at the FDA, I thought I'd say something about what FDA approval is. And what happens is, and the reason why I'm putting this up here is I want people to know that you may be prescribed or given a treatment that doesn't technically say FDA approval. It doesn't mean it's not an effective treatment, doesn't mean it's not appropriate. But when a company wants to get FDA approval, they have to go through a rigorous process. And generally speaking, there has to be 2 successful trials. It has to be replicated. And what we're here today also is to hear, well, what are the endpoints? What's the most important things we want to hear from patients? Is that what symptoms are bothering them the most that then a company can target this to improve. And then there's more of a general indication, which isn't done as often, but it's treating all different types of neuropathic pain. So here's just a list of some of the FDA or the FDA-approved medications for peripheral neuropathic pain. As you can see, diabetic peripheral neuropathy and post-herpetic neuralgia are the most common kind. And these medications, for example, Nucynta and Lyrica and Cymbalta were all approved. And what that means is they met those FDA requirements. And you can see there's a range of different types of treatments. Some of these started off as antidepressants, some are anticonvulsants used for epilepsy, and some are just pain medications. The reason I put this slide up here is this is an expert review panel from 2015. They got together and they provided guidelines. And these are just guidelines for physicians. These are not hard and fast rules. These are just general recommendations that physicians can go off of, hearing from an expert panel who's reviewed the literature and also given their own experience. And what they recommend, when they call something first line, what they're meaning is there's effectiveness has been shown in their experience or through proof of literature. And then that is balanced against the risk of treatment, so the side effects and potential risks. So what they're saying in these strong recommendations is that this is what they would consider trying first because they think that in most patients the benefit would outweigh the risks. And then they have some weaker recommendations, and that doesn't mean that they don't work. The reason why they put that was it means that maybe the evidence wasn't as strong, so maybe they don't have as much proof that a medication might work, or a medication might work, but their concern is you don't want to jump to it because maybe there's a lot of side effects that make it difficult for a patient to tolerate. And then a lot of times in reality, combinations of treatments are used. So for example, they may use 2 different types of drugs, or you might use one drug and another treatment modality such as acupuncture. Problem is it's much harder to study and there's less evidence to prove it. However, it's used commonly in practice, and physicians may even tell you when you see them, this is what I've used and this is what's been shown to be effective in your case. Then there are other types of anticonvulsants that are used sometimes, and then there's also immunoglobulins sometimes used for other treatments, for the certain specific types of treatments. So other components of therapy. So one of the most important things is to treat your underlying cause and condition. So for example, if you have peripheral neuropathic pain and your diabetes isn't well controlled, your physician's going to, of course, want to control that as a portion of it. Another component of therapy, which can be very helpful, is exercise and or physical therapy. Although it seems counterintuitive because you may be in pain and say, I don't really feel like I can move or I can do this activity because of pain depending on where it is, it's been shown that, well, a diabetic peripheral neuropathy, for example, the pain may improve with the exercise. And then there's cognitive behavior therapy, which is a type of psychotherapy which has limited number of side effects, of course, but it has been shown to have some evidence of improvement. And then there's other modalities, and these modalities may have limited evidence or support from placebo-controlled trials. Doesn't mean they don't work, but it may be that there's not as much proof of them because maybe there's been faulty studies. But I've seen a lot of people, both physicians recommending and patients, who have had success with acupuncture, for example. Then you can see some other ones here. Spinal cord stimulation, massage, and TENS units are also used fairly commonly. And when these are used, a lot of times they're used in concert with another treatment. So we all know that peripheral neuropathic pain is a very serious condition, and it has a significant impact on the quality of people's lives. So the key to success would be to diagnose appropriately, identify it, find what is modifiable, modify that the best you can, and then maximize the effectiveness of the treatments while keeping in mind the long-term adverse events. Because peripheral neuropathic pain is often chronic, it's not something that happens in a couple of days and goes away, you want to make sure that the long-term plan, one, is flexible, and also you have to consider what the long-term implications of treatment would be. For example, consider long-term adverse events or side effects. So there are a number of challenges to drug development. So although we've talked about drugs being FDA approved in all sorts of modalities that may be effective, many patients still are not completely satisfied with treatment. So efficacy is incredibly important that we have to target. Most trials compare single agents. So as I mentioned, some people are having multiple modalities of treatment. There's so many causes of neuropathic pain. So although one medication or one treatment might work for a specific type, does it work for others? And that has to be proven over time. And also medications have their side effects. So although a medication, for example, might be very effective, it may not be tolerated by that person or it may not be suitable long term. So overall, in conclusion, the FDA is aware of the unmet need and that is experienced by patients with peripheral neuropathic pain. And one of the points of this meeting today is to gain input from the patients and caregivers that helps us then communicate the appropriate information to drug companies trying to design these trials. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good afternoon, excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nikunj Patel. I am a clinical outcome assessment reviewer here at the FDA. Our team advises review divisions on matters concerning clinical outcome assessments, such as patient questionnaires, which we commonly refer to as patient-reported outcomes, or PROs. We evaluate these PROs to ensure that they are assessing the most important signs, symptoms, and impacts to patients, and that they are assessing these concepts in an accurate and reliable manner. Today, I will briefly go over how we use information from these patient-focused drug development meetings and how we intend to incorporate patient input into clinical trial endpoints. Here is my disclaimer. You may be wondering, we have these PFDD meetings where patients such as yourself are here and to discuss, but where do we go from here? What's the end game? How do we take what we learned today and generate clinically relevant, patient-focused endpoints to incorporate in clinical trials? So I hope in the next few slides I can answer some of these questions. One of the main advantages in having this meeting is that it gives all stakeholders, patients, drug companies, questionnaire developers, clinicians, FDA, and others the opportunity to listen to your voice, patient's voice, your experiences, particularly to hear what's important from your perspective and how you describe your symptoms and impacts in your own words. These meetings also inform us on how we at FDA review PROs in drug applications to ensure they are adequately assessing your perspective. PFDD meetings also help us to think about incorporating patient-focused endpoints in clinical trials as appropriate. So what is an endpoint? In the context of a clinical trial, our goal is to measure key disease-specific outcomes of interest, reflecting how patients feel, function, and survive. To do this, we sometimes use PROs, patient questionnaires. In this case, the study endpoint would be how the patient questionnaire will be measured and analyzed in a clinical study to address a particular research question reflecting specific outcomes of interest, and these outcomes can be safety, can be efficacy related. There are many things that are important to patients that are discussed during PFDD meetings. However, not all of these things lend themselves to being measured in clinical trials for drug approval, as they may be impacted by many factors beyond the treatment itself, such as socioeconomic factors. So therefore, making it challenging to interpret its results. Here at FDA, we focus on safety and efficacy. So for example, financial well-being may be an important factor, an important concept to patients, but may not be impacted by treatment in a clinical study setting. So we encourage drug sponsors, drug companies, to consider selecting the most important and relevant concepts to support key study endpoints that are likely to change as a result of a treatment. Financial well-being and other important concepts that are unrelated to treatment can still very well be assessed and measured, but perhaps for exploratory purposes. While there are many benefits of having PFDD meetings, I want to underscore this is just a starting point. We also have to be mindful about considerable amount of work that needs to be continued after we are done today. We strongly recommend that drug companies or other researchers who are developing these patient questionnaires to engage additional patients, those patients who are not here in the room today, as well as gather input from physicians, other experts as appropriate. Such an engagement may help confirm the questionnaires, include patient-relevant information, and to ensure the questions and instruction in the questionnaires are clear and understandable across patient population before they are incorporated in clinical trials. So my job here at FDA as a reviewer is to apply our drug laws and regulations. Within these regulations, there are regulatory standards for assessments such as patient questionnaires. Our goal is to make sure these PROs are well-defined and reliable. In other words, are they measuring what they're supposed to measure, both accurately and reliably? We want to make sure they're not misleading in any way. So not only do we recommend drug companies to engage patients to develop questionnaires using qualitative research, we also recommend them to perform quantitative studies as well, statistical testing, for example, to show that they are well-defined and reliable. In addition, patient input can be quite valuable and powerful, along with other methodologies, in determining how to interpret what is clinically meaningful change in the context of a clinical trial. Therefore, we recommend that sponsors to engage the agency early and throughout drug development for FDA input. So how can we help you and other stakeholders who are involved in this area of drug development? So there are 3 pathways to provide advice on clinical outcome assessments, such as PROs. The first one is within the context of an individual drug development program, while the other 2 are outside. This is where an individual, an organization, has opportunity to engage the agency. In the first pathway, the IND, NDA, BLA pathway, we encourage drug companies to begin this discussion as early as a pre-IND stage. So if any work needs to be done on proposed questionnaires, there's time to do so before the pivotal studies are conducted. The second pathway, this is through our drug development tool or DDT qualification program. Through this pathway, we work with questionnaire developers to develop and qualify PROs for use across multiple drug development programs in a pre-competitive space. The third pathway, this is relatively new. This is through another avenue to engage the agency through our critical path innovation meetings program. Through this program, a person or an organization has opportunity to discuss and receive general feedback on questionnaires such as PRO. It could be any other subject as well, but in this case, a PRO or other clinical outcome assessment. In conclusion, I have 3 key takeaways. First, PFDD meetings are a starting point for developing and using patient-focused outcome measures and endpoints. Second, the outcomes of PFDD meetings will support and guide FDA's assessment of clinical benefit in drug reviews. And the third point is patient's input ultimately helps determine what is measured to provide evidence of treatment benefit. how best to measure what matters most to patients, and what amount of change is meaningful to patients. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.
Okay, great. Thank you to my FDA colleagues for your presentations. And now you have a background on why we're all here today. And you've heard that your input is very important to the work that we do here at the FDA and the work that others do to really give us a good understanding of what matters to you most in your management of neuropathic pain. So what I'd like to do now is to go over the discussion format. So as I mentioned early on, just a little while ago, that there are two topics. And so topic one is on disease symptoms and daily impacts. So here what we're going to be listening for is what are your most bothersome symptoms of living with neuropathic pain? How does your pain manifest? And how does it, what's a good day like? What's an average day like? What is a bad day like? How does it impact your ability to do certain activities or to not do certain activities? And really, what worries you most about your condition? And then in topic two, we're going to be listening for your perspectives on treatment approaches. So what are you doing currently to treat your neuropathic pain? And is it working? And what's not working about it? What are the benefits of your treatment? What are the downsides of your treatment? And how has your treatment regimen changed over time since you've been diagnosed? And then lastly, we're definitely going to be spending some time on what you look for in an ideal treatment. What are the aspects of an ideal treatment that are important to you? And we'll also spend a little bit of time on what factors you consider when deciding whether or not to participate in a clinical trial. So we'll have a scenario question that we'll pose to you, and we'll get your immediate, initial thoughts when you hear this type of scenario. So here's how this is going to work. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a panel discussion followed by a group facilitated discussion. So we're going to first hear from a panel of patients. And on that note, I'd like to invite our topic one panelists to come on up and have a seat at the panel table. So I'd like to make a quick shout out to our amazing panelists that we have here today, topic one and topic two panelists. They've worked very hard to get their panel summaries together, and we're really grateful that they're here, and we're looking forward to hearing from them. So the purpose of the panel discussion is to set a good foundation for our discussion. Those panelists, they reflect a range of experiences in living with neuropathic pain, and so they'll each have about 3 to 4 minutes to present their comments. And once they've completed presenting their comments, we're going to then broaden the discussion and open it up to other patients and caregivers in the audience to build on what you've heard from the panelists. So periodically, I will ask some questions along the way. I'll turn to my FDA colleagues to ask some questions along the way. And we invite patients and caregivers in the audience to raise your hand and share your perspectives with us. We'll have microphone runners around the room, and they'll come to you with a microphone. And so if you're interested in sharing some comments, just raise your hand, and if you could state your first name, that would be most appreciated. So along the way, we have some other ways that we'll be hearing from you. So in addition to the group facilitated discussion, we'll have some polling questions along the way. And you should have, for patients and caregivers in the first 2 rows where we encouraged you all to sit, you should have these little clickers that we've passed out. And we're going to test those out in just a bit. And actually, Shannon, would you mind passing clickers out to our panelists also? Thank you. So this is these are not scientific surveys that we're going to be doing. It's entirely voluntary. It's just a way for us to learn more about the perspectives in the room. And also on the web, which I'd like to make a shout out to. We have about 150 people joining us on the webcast today. So we can't see you, those of you on the web, but you are a very important part of our meeting. We're going to be hearing from you shortly. We'll do some phone comments along the way. So those of you on the web, please participate in the polling. Please continue to submit your remarks through the webcast, and it's a very big part of our meeting today. So we do ask that for the polling questions that it's only patients and caregivers. I'm not sure why that says parents of patients only. It should say patients and caregivers only to participate in the polling. So so that'll be another way for us to learn about perspectives in the room and on the web. And then Sarah had mentioned earlier that we have a public docket, and what this is a space that we have online. You see the website here. We highly encourage you to submit comments to the public docket, which is basically another way to continue this discussion. We can't possibly cover everything about symptoms, impacts, and treatments that are important to you within a 4-hour meeting. So we have a public docket that will be open for 2 months after this meeting. So it closes on August 10th. And it's a huge and very important part of our understanding of neuropathic pain. So please continue to submit your comments there. And all of those comments are going to be incorporated in our summary report that Sarah had mentioned, the Voice of the Patient report. So we will look for very helpful information through the docket as well. And anybody is welcome to comment, not just patients and caregivers. So we have some resources here at FDA that we always like to share during these public meetings, just to let you know of other ways that you can sort of interact with the FDA, especially as it relates to patients and what matters most to patients. So within the Office of Center Director, we have the Professional Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement Team, or PACE. We have Chris Melton here, who is the primary contact that you can contact for this meeting. And so that's one very helpful office that we collaborate with. And the second very helpful office that we work closely with is the FDA Office of Health and Constituent Affairs, or OCA. FDA is full of acronyms, so we call this one OCA. And there's, you can see their email address right here, and you can feel free to contact them. Again, they serve as a liaison between FDA and stakeholder organizations. So we do have a few discussion ground rules for the day. This is a meeting where we are really focused on the patients and caregivers and advocates. So we encourage patients and caregivers and advocates to contribute to this dialogue. FDA and industry and academia and other government agencies who are here, we're really grateful that you're here. We know that this meeting is going to be really important for you too, but we ask that you stay in listening mode as this is really a day to hear from the patients and caregivers. The discussion will focus on symptoms and treatments. We are going to do our very best to stay on topic. We know that there's so many aspects and so many considerations that you as patients live with and think about as it relates to neuropathic pain, but we're going to focus on symptoms and treatments for today. So we'll stay on topic. We do have the open public comment period, which I had mentioned earlier, for aspects or considerations that are outside of the scope of topic 1 and topic 2. So I hate to be a stickler for time and a stickler for staying on topic, but I will have to direct you to the open public comment period, or more importantly, the public docket, if there are aspects that you'd like to share that are outside of topic 1 and topic 2. So the views expressed today are personal opinions, and so on that note, respect for one another is paramount. And last but not least, very importantly, we will have evaluation forms that will pass out closer to the end of the meeting. We read through each and every single one of them. They're very important to us, so let us know how the meeting went for you today, and it helps us as we prepare for our next one. Okay, so what I would like to do now is a quick test of our clickers to make sure that everything is working. And those of you on the web, you can also participate. So the first question, so patients and caregivers, if you could please grab your clicker. The first question is, where do you live? Press A for within Washington, D.C. metro area, or B for outside of Washington, D.C. metro area. It up? Okay. All right, so it looks like 2/3 of you are neighbors, so welcome again. And it looks like a little over 1/3 of you are traveling from outside of the DC metro area. Thank you for coming. We are so glad this is not a rainy day because we went through a stretch in May where it just rained for about 3 weeks straight, which was no fun. So glad it's a sunny day and that you're here for it. Okay, let's do the next question. Have you ever been diagnosed as having neuropathic pain associated with peripheral neuropathy? Press A for yes or B for no. Okay, so the majority of you in the room, almost 90%, have been diagnosed as having neuropathic pain. So we know that it's not easy to come here and to travel, and so it really means a lot to us that you're here to share these perspectives with us. And I think we have one more. Okay. Your age. A, younger than 18. B, 18 to 29. C, 30 to 39. D, 40 to 49. E, 50 to 59. F, 60 to 69. G, 70 or greater. Okay, so it looks like we have a pretty good spread. The majority of you are in the age 60 to 69. We've got 50 to 59, 70 or greater, and then we also have some representation between 30 and 49. So lots of perspectives in the room. And lastly, do you identify as A, male, or B, female? Okay, so we almost kind of the same. Okay, so almost half and half, equal spread of male and female. Great. What is the length of time since your diagnosis of neuropathic pain associated with peripheral neuropathy? So A, less than a year ago. B, 1 to 2 years ago. C, 2 to 5 years ago. D, 5 to 10 years ago. E, more than 10 years ago. Or F, I'm not sure. Okay, so we definitely have a nice spread of experiences and perspectives here, which is great. Everywhere from 1 to 2 years ago all the way over to more than 10 years ago, and some that have identified that they're not sure when the actual neuropathic pain was diagnosed. Okay? Okay, what is the underlying cause of your neuropathic pain? Check all that apply. A, trauma, physical injury, or surgery. B, metabolic or endocrine disorders such as diabetes. C, medication toxicity. D, viral or bacterial infection. E, other condition not mentioned. Or F, I'm not sure. Okay. All right, so it looks like we have a few that identified some sort of trauma, physical injury, or surgery. We have medication toxicity. We've got viral and bacterial infection. There are definitely other conditions not mentioned, so I will just point out now that when we do our large group facilitated discussion, if you're comfortable to do so, if you could mention your underlying cause of neuropathic pain, that'll help us a little bit understand the context of your comments also. And then F, I'm not sure. Okay? Okay. We have a lot of polling questions, don't we, to test these out. Okay. What comorbid conditions do you have, if applicable? Check all that apply. So A, depression or anxiety. B, diabetes. C, cancer. D, kidney disease. E, chronic bacterial or viral infection. F, other comorbid conditions not mentioned. Or G, I don't have a comorbid condition that I'm aware of. All right, so we have depression mentioned, we have cancer, other comorbid conditions not mentioned. Again, I'll just, put a plug in for, if you're comfortable to do so, to share that with us, and many others that said they don't have a comorbid condition that they're aware of. Let me check in with the web. I know we just went through a lot of polling questions. Can you give us an idea of who's on the web?
Very similar. We have a 50-50 male-female split. A range of ages with the majority in 60 to 69 range, a similar range for the length of time since diagnosis, and similar results also for the underlying cause and comorbid conditions.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I think, is that our last one? Okay, so thank you so much for going through those polling questions with us. We know that the technology works because every once in a while we get a little, unexpected clickers don't work type thing, but I'm so glad it worked. All right, so now we're going to get started with the highlight of today, which is to hear from you all, from patients and caregivers. So once again, we have 4 panelists on topic 1, and we're going to start with Adam. What I'll ask you to do is when it's your turn to speak, just press the red button on your microphone, and you can go right into your comments, and then when you're done, just hit the red button again to turn the microphone off. Okay? So Adam? All yours.
Hello. First of all, before I dive in, I'd just like to thank all of you for having us here. I can probably speak on behalf of a lot of neuropathy patients in saying that it's wonderful to get this type of publicity for the range of disease processes that cause peripheral neuropathy. For me, in terms of the sensations I personally experience, I primarily experience 3 different types of sensations. The first is what I would describe as sort of a deep muscular soreness, and that is primarily activity dependent. So, for example, as I sit here right now, my legs feel almost entirely normal. But if I were to stand for, let's say 10 minutes or, walk half to 3/4 of a mile, I would start getting a deep muscular pain down the back of both legs, which primarily manifests in my calves, back of the knees, and hamstrings. The second sensation that I experience with some regularity is it's almost like a heaviness. So I think the easiest way to think about it would be almost like if you're riding an exercise bike with the resistance turned up, and every step would require some additional effort. And that's also very much activity dependent. So, if I were to go walk to the exit sign, I wouldn't feel it, but if I went and walked a mile and a half, I certainly would. The third sensation that I experience is not activity dependent, and that's it's more of a classic burning sensation. So very much on the surface of the skin, and I get that up and down both legs and in my hands as well, and it sort of comes and goes. And that is, very much sort of this classic sensation where you feel like your legs are on fire to a degree, and it can be at times quite uncomfortable. In terms of the specific activities that peripheral neuropathy affects for me, as a young guy, I developed peripheral neuropathy about 2 years ago at the age of 28. At that time, I was very physically active, running 40 miles a week in the gym 7 days a week. So within about a 24-hour period post-onset, that ability to really move in a sense was dramatically reduced. So today, I would say, with some variation, I'm able to walk about 1.5 miles to 2.5 miles over the course of a day with breaks. And at any one time, I can generally walk about 1 mile comfortably. In terms of standing, for me, it's, I'd say within 10 minutes, I'll start to get uncomfortable, and within about a half an hour, it's really time to find a seat. And so you can think about how that plays out within one's daily life. So some very routine activities like, riding the subway, if you can't find a seat, going food shopping, anything that would require one to stay on their feet for an extended period of time can be dramatically impacted, and it requires a lot of strategic thinking in order to plan out one's day. In terms of the fluctuation for me between the best and the worst days, for me on the worst days, and for me it's not really a day-to-day fluctuation, it's more of a week-to-week or a month-to-month fluctuation. But on the worst days, I've had problems, taking a 5-minute walk from my home to a subway station. So it's gotten to that point at times. And in terms of the burnings, I've had nights where, it can really impact my ability to sleep comfortably. Conversely, during the best stretches, I'm able to walk, well over 3 miles in one day. So there is, or there has been, some variability in my experience. In terms of the change over time, since onset, I would say there isn't one long-term trend, either positively or negatively. There have certainly been fluctuations over a period of months. But if I look back a year and a half, I would say I'm in roughly the same position that I was in. And for the final question, in terms of my biggest fear, I think it would be that there might be some dramatic uptick in symptoms, which would, quite literally disable me, or require some, heavy-hitting pain medication, which would, dramatically impact my quality of life.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Okay.
Next, we have Susan.
Good afternoon. I'd like to echo Adam's thanks to the organizers of this meeting for coming and for listening to all of us. My neuropathy resulted from the chemo I received for colon cancer in 2009. Throughout my treatment, peripheral neuropathy is a very recognized and anticipated side effect of oxaliplatin, which is one of the drugs I was treated with. And so throughout my treatment, I was monitored very, very carefully for the development of neuropathy, pain level, function level. And my neuropathy stayed within expected range, so I was able to get my full course of chemo, which of course is what I wanted. But I completed that chemo. I was on the home stretch, and 6 weeks after is when I was struck with the debilitating pain of peripheral neuropathy. My feet were on fire, my lower legs, my hands. It was what others have described, that burning sensation. You feel like you're stepping on frying pans, and electric shocks going up my arms, my legs, the sides of my feet. I certainly couldn't walk, and I certainly couldn't sleep. My oncologist started me on gabapentin and promised that with time it would get better, and it has. So nearly 7 years now, I'm cancer-free, which is a good thing. I'm on 3,300 milligrams of gabapentin. Without it, I couldn't function. My pain level today is greatly reduced. It's that sort of constant numbness, unpleasant numbness. Tingling's not pleasant. I can't feel my feet. They sort of feel wooden, so my balance is lousy, and it's something I work on all the time. I have an increased sensitivity to cold. I love a good crisp winter day, but I can't take my grandkids ice skating or teach them how to ski. And the summertime, like today, normal air conditioning, particularly on my feet, just turns them into blocks of ice. If I sit, I can stand and walk okay, but if I sit for long periods of time, the pain is worse. So travel in a car or airplane is has become for me very difficult. And even on my very, very best days, when I'm able to do what it is I want to do, I constantly have to be mindful not to do too much. Don't have too much fun, because if I get overtired or stressed, that for me is when the neuropathy kicks in. So after one of those really good days, I sometimes have a really bad night. And in that bad night, the pain intensifies. It's what I described on my worst days. It's impossible to sleep, and I'm not a heck of a lot of fun on those evenings. And as I lie in bed, the neuropathy reminds me that I'm living with cancer. It's a constant trigger in my mind that I'll always be living or battling my cancer. I know I'm lucky. I can function. And plenty of people out there can't. They have a much harder time. The disease for them is much more debilitating. But I bet there's hundreds and I bet thousands of people like me. They probably aren't even in this room because they've accepted peripheral neuropathy as a consequence of the chemo. You just accept it. I'm happy to be cancer-free, but yet ironically, the drug that may have cured my cancer has left me with peripheral neuropathy. And it's the neuropathy that makes me unable to really fully enjoy the life that the successful cancer treatment has given me. And that's what makes me really mad. So what do I worry about? I worry that I take a heck of a lot of a drug that was developed to keep people from having seizures. And if I'm really lucky, I may be taking it for a real long time. And who knows what that's going to do and how it's going to impact, where I go in this next sort of chunk of my life. So anyway, that's where I am today. I'd like to thank again the people on the panel who are joining me and for the organizers of the committee. And I look forward to our discussions this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Susan. Next, we have David.
Yeah, hi, I'm David Morrow, and I'm Senior Vice President of the Neuropathy Support Network. And I have a very similar story as Susan. My neuropathy started in 2009 as well as a result of chemotherapy and surgery I received for colon cancer. And my symptoms started probably I had 12 sessions of chemotherapy that were scheduled, and it started probably on my 9th session. And by my 11th session, my doctor stopped me and wouldn't let me take the last session of chemotherapy. The symptoms began slowly. They were sort of mild, more tingling and numbness in my hands. And I would get this weird sensation that I was wearing socks even when I wasn't. And then before I knew it, I began fumbling things. And it was, when I dropped my first cup of coffee, I thought it was just because I was being clumsy. And then I dropped another cup of coffee. And then I was seizing my food and I dropped my salt shaker. And I would drop my keys. And it wasn't because I couldn't feel things. It was like if I put my hand in my pocket and I scraped my fingers up against my keys, it almost felt like I was scraping them up against shattered glass. It was very painful. But when I would pick something up like a cup of coffee, I couldn't feel how hard I was gripping it. So ultimately what would happen is when I would pick something up, it would slip through my fingers. But as bad as it got for my hands, it really became worse with my feet and my legs. What would happen is at night I'd be woken up in the middle of the night with like these stabbing pains in the bottom of my feet that would shoot up my legs. And then it was felt like I was walking on rubber pads, rounded rubber pads. Which is a very weird sensation. And ultimately what that resulted in was it affected my balance. I couldn't really balance. So like, for instance, if I was taking a shower and I was rinsing my hair and I closed my eyes, I would fall. I would fall against the wall. Or if when I get up in the morning, first of all, when I get up in the morning, I would have the pain also in my feet and try to move around. But if I try to put my pants on and I lift one leg off the floor, I would fall. So what I learned to do was I learned that I would have to lean against a wall or sit down and do certain particular things. And where this became a problem was at a certain point, I realized I couldn't really tell where my feet were. And this manifested in a situation where I was driving into a restaurant to meet a friend, and I pulled into a parking space, and I hit the gas pedal instead of the brake, and I ended up on top of a cement bumper. And at that point, luckily there wasn't a car in front of me, but I realized at that point how a person could actually drive through a store window. So ultimately what ended up happening was I had, in my worst times, I had to get people to drive, someone to drive me because I couldn't drive myself. And then because of the balance issues, when I would get out of the car, there was like an instant when I got out of the car, because I couldn't feel where my feet were, I was in a parking lot, got out of the car, and my feet were up against a curb, and I ended up falling flat on my face. I fell a couple times because not knowing where my feet were. So as far as specific activities that I wasn't able to do, through the symptoms I described to you, pretty much all those were due to the chemotherapy. But also because of the surgery that I had abdominal surgery, I lost sensation in my stomach. So I have no feeling on the top layer of my stomach, which is it's a very strange feeling because I could feel underneath it, but I can't feel on top. So in an intimate situation like with my girlfriend, if you have stomach-to-stomach contact, it's not painful. But if there's any friction, there's a great deal of pain underneath my skin, and I don't know how to describe it. The other thing that occurs is that occasionally I'll develop itching on my stomach that's down below my skin that I can't reach. So I could scratch all I want, but the itching's not going to go away. So basically, over time, a lot of these symptoms have dissipated. Now, the neuropathy in my hands, I really don't feel it or notice it unless I think about it. I do still have the feeling of walking on rubber pads sometimes, and sometimes it's painful if I've been sitting for a long time and get up. And I still have the issues with balance, which still bothers me. If I try to climb something a little bit steep, it's not going up so bad, it's coming down. It gets a little scary, and it's hard for me to run. Because of the balance issues and stuff. As far as the surgery goes, my stomach is always going to feel the way it is. I don't have any hope that that's ever really going to change. So the thing that really worries me the most is, as I get older, I'm a little worried about the balance issues because I'm afraid that balance issues may end up affecting my mobility. But I have to admit that I really feel a little guilty sharing this because I'm getting better. And I know that there are so many people out there that are so much worse off than what I am. And I just wanted to share something that I think is very important and really impacts this and really speaks to this one question about what worries you most about your condition. The Neuropathy Support Network just recently did, with the Western Neuropathy Association, just recently did a comprehensive survey. And we received a great deal of responses from people. And we asked this very specific question, what worries you most about your condition? And we found that there was a common underlying thread that was very similar to all age groups within the people that responded. But there was one response that really stood out for me, and I think really underscores the need for meetings like this that we're having today. And it was from a young woman who had just turned, as she says in her own words, she's just barely 20 years old. And she had been diagnosed with diabetes 1. But her diagnosis for her peripheral neuropathy was idiopathic. And so when she reached the survey question, what worries you most about your condition? She simply answered, my future. Now, I understand this is a girl who's just turned 20. She answered, my future. I'm still very young, and the prospect of being in this kind of pain the rest of my life makes me not want to live it. And that was a common theme through many of the responses that we received.
Thank you, David. And last, we have Beth.
I'm glad I'm old when I got this. I do feel bad for you young people. My problem began with minor bilateral pain in my feet in 2009. I was a triathlete. I noticed it when I was running. It was such a slow progression that I didn't even think of going to a neurologist. I saw orthopedist and podiatrist. And it wasn't until my hands started tingling and going numb that I said, oh, neuropathy, I need to see a neurologist. And I'm sorry. So it wasn't until I actually started feeling some tingling in my hands that I went to a neurologist. But for like 18 months, I had no clue. I describe my pain as sharp, constant, bruised, like somebody took a hammer to my feet. I know that's not typical. Most people don't describe it that way. It's true whether I'm sitting, standing, or laying down. And when I'm walking, it's kind of like I'm walking on rocks. So I wouldn't say this is just bothersome. It's debilitating. I spend 16 hours a day laying down. And not all at once. I intersperse it with what I need to do to live. So I just do things in short bursts. Besides the pain, I do get electrical shocks. It's like sticking your finger in a light socket. I get them in my toes, my hands, my feet, my hips, my eyes. That's the worst. Doctors don't know what causes that. They just say it's progression. So I don't know. And they go away. I'll be plagued with them for a month, and then they disappear, and I'll be fine for a few months, and then the electrical shocks start up again. At least they're short, short bursts. The other bothersome thing is that one doctor described it as he doesn't think my nerves know how to open and close my veins and arteries, because I can't find anything wrong with my veins and arteries, but my lower half of my body takes on the temperature of the air. So my toes, first it started with my toes, they would be freezing, then my feet, now it goes all the way up to my hips. So a winter, I do not want to be outside in the winter. Let me see. Oh, and I do understand the tingling and burning. That's on the top of my feet, the not wanting to wear socks, the brushing of the sheet against your feet that sends you jumping. I know those are kind of the common neuropathy feelings. It usually happens when I'm overtired, though. I've been standing or walking for more than a few minutes, and that's when I tend to think of my feet as being on fire. I was like, oh, yep, they're on fire. Need to get them in ice. And like I said, I do have the numbness in my toes, in particular. So my feet, they've got the pain at the bottom, the tingling and burning at the top, and my toes are numb. My hands are, typical neuropathy, the tingling and burning, numbness there, numbness. Things that I can't do, well, yeah, sleeping's the problem. Everybody knows that. How do you sleep in pain? How do you fall asleep in pain? And it wakes you up in the middle of the night. But I struggle to make it through every day. I know I look really normal to most people, especially when I'm at work. So people don't realize that no matter what I'm doing, what in the foremost part of my brain is, what I'm thinking is, my feet hurt. And they will be hurting so bad by the end of today that I will probably be in bed all day tomorrow. I just know that. If you're going to do something, you plan for a day, and then you pay for a day. That's okay. I lost my ability to do just about everything. I think I mentioned I was a triathlete. I worked 50, 60 hours a day. I can't sit for long periods of time. So even just going to movies or plays or a game are uncomfortable. I do it sometimes. I'm untreated. None of the medications worked or gave me such bad side effects that the doctor said, nope, you can't take that any longer. I can still do daily hygiene, but it makes me tired. I have the shower handles and the seats, but okay, then you got to sit down and rest for a while before you go on to the next thing. I have a rolling walker to get around the kitchen. So even preparing, I changed my diet. I guess that's for a good thing. We only eat things that can be prepared in less than 5 minutes. Raw fruits and vegetables, nuts, peanut butter sandwiches, anything that doesn't make me have to stand on my feet and cook. I live alone, so that's a problem. I used to be a veterinary technician. I worked 50 to 60 hours a week. I loved the job. It's a job I got late in life. I'm glad I quit corporate America in my 40s and went back to school and got the chance to do it. So That's what I said. I'm really sorry for those of you that are young. A lot of people think that that's a very strange profession for me to have, but I only work 2 hours a day. I work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, 2 hours a day. This job's good for me because I can stand when I want to, sit when I want to, and walk when I want to. There aren't very many jobs that will let you come in for 2 hours a day and do that. But I've been there working there for a very long time, so that helps. But I miss it. Gee, what have I not said? One more
Beth,
page.
you want to tell us what worries you most about your condition?
Oh, I fall. I live alone. So I guess that's, that's the worst thing. I've had some really bad falls. I've torn my MCL. I've broken toes. I end up bruised. I knocked myself out once, falling down the stairs. And so living alone, that's the main thing that I worry about.
Thank you.
Who's going to take care of me? I don't know.
Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you for your comments. Is this on? Yep. So let's give our panelists a round of applause for putting together. Thank you for preparing so well and for writing and sharing such personal stories with all of us. So it really means a lot to us. And I want to ask to the audience, how many of you feel as though, the experiences that you've had, what the panelists have said, how much of that resonates with your own experiences? Yeah, so a lot of the patients in the room are able to have similar experiences, and I know there's different experiences too. I did take a few notes as the panelists were talking, and so I just want to do a really quick show of hands. Adam, you mentioned that you feel like your legs are on fire. Do others share something similar, that your legs are on fire? Okay. And then Susan, you mentioned that you have an increased sensitivity to cold. Others? Okay. Yep. David, you mentioned balance issues. Balance issues. Others? Absolutely. Okay. And then Beth, you mentioned, so while you were talking, you said that, I think, you said you're not sure how many others feel this way. You said you feel you feel like a hammer on your feet. How about others? Hammer on your feet or walking on rocks, I think is what Beth said. So there are others that share your perspective. So that's glad to see so many similar experiences. We're looking forward to hearing some of the different experiences in here as well. I do also want to ask, how many of you are in pain right now as you're sitting here sharing, ready to share your experiences with us? Let's see, 6, 7, 8. Almost 12 or 13 hands that I see raised for those of you in pain right now. Okay, so we're going to do another polling question to sort of kick off our discussion now. So everybody get your clickers out again. Okay, what parts of your body do you experience your most severe neuropathic pain? Check all that apply. A, head, face, or neck. B, hands or arms. C, feet or legs. D, trunk. E, back. F, genital area. Or G, other areas not mentioned. Okay, so it looks like those of you answering have said that C, feet or legs, is where you experience your most severe neuropathic pain. We also see some hands or arms, and trunk, genital area, and let's see, is there other areas not mentioned? Not too much, but please be sure to tell us if there's anything else that comes to mind. How about on the web? What do we see there?
We see 95% for feet or legs, 38% for hand or arms, and between 15 or 20 for all the rest.
Okay, okay. So would somebody like to start us off with feet or legs? Now we've heard different ways our panelists mention how they're experiencing it in their feet or legs, but would somebody in the audience, other patients or caregivers, like to tell us how you experience it in your feet or legs? And what do you experience? What is that sensation that you feel?
Well, One thing that we haven't talked about, and maybe it's not within the scope of this discussion, but I experience more numbness than pain, to the extent that I'll be walking or standing for a long time, and then I lose the contact with the ground, which David referred to, and I have to hold on to something or shake my foot. I was in a department store with one of my kids buying clothes for him, and we finished that, and then we met some family that we knew, and we started talking in the department store area, and they kept chatting away and chatting away. I had to go on. I had to look for something to hold on to. I found the tie table, and I sort of looked like I was looking at ties, holding on to the edge of the table so I could shake my foot. It's a very scary sensation if you feel you're losing contact with the ground. You don't want to fall. And I know that numbness is not on the agenda necessarily, but it often gets overlooked. And, you know, if one day there could be a medication to cure numbness or to regenerate the nerves, you know, that would be a real blockbuster instead of just focusing on pain all the time. But numbness shouldn't be disregarded.
Steve, thank you so much for your comments. And actually, we will be talking some more about numbness. I know it's a very important aspect of how you experience the neuropathy. And can I just ask, actually, while we're on the topic of numbness, is it the numbness that leads to the balance issues that we've heard David describe and now Steve that you've described? I see heads nodding. Would somebody like to?
Sure, I'll speak up on that. My name's Gary Shrout. I've had this for a very long time. It's idiopathic. Nobody knows why or what. As Dr. Galati was going through this thing, it's like, yep, with all the pains and everything. So all the symptoms. I certainly identify with the numbness.
We're going to see if your mic is on. It doesn't sound like it's on.
Okay, how's that?
No. Go ahead and use mine.
Okay, there we go. All right. Name's Gary Shrout. I've had this for probably over 30 years, so not diagnosed officially till 13 years ago. Idiopathic, nobody knows why. All the pain symptoms you can possibly have, I've had. I've been very blessed. I'm still able to function pretty much normally. Balance is a big deal. Numbness is a big deal. I've classified my nerves into 3 categories, and I'm determined to hang on to the ones I really need. The good guys, the normal ones, are still doing fine. Hey, happy Friday. The dead ones, it's like, dude, I'm gone. You're not going to hear from me again. And then the ones screaming for help. And it's the ones screaming for help, I think, that are partially damaged, that are still communicating, that cause the problems. Numbness is a huge deal. I've had the feeling of wearing socks. That's like it right now. And I'll make some comments later in more appropriate time about some interesting things that I think that are happening. But yes, numbness is a deal. Balance is a deal. My pain has been everything that you guys have listed up there, including the ice pick going through the top of the foot, which is real nice in the middle of the night. Sleep is an issue. Get up, go to the bathroom. You may have been exhausted from the day, and you finally pass out despite the pain. Get up, go to the bathroom. Well, you've had a little bit of rest. Guess what? Getting back to sleep is not an option. So I hope that contributes what you're looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
I do think there's something that also that needs to be said about the numbness. It's so that people that don't have this understand. Because you are numb doesn't mean you don't feel pain. You can have numbness and still feel severe pain.
Okay.
And it's sort of a weird condition when you first experience it.
Okay, I heard a lot of people agree to what you just said, David. Okay. Let's take one more comment.
Okay, I had Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS, 42 years ago, and for the last 42 years, the first thing I want to do at the end of a day, or even in the middle of a day, is rip off my shoes and socks. My feet barefoot, I feel a lot better. I was an aspiring drummer, and I had to kind of give that up due to, if you know anything about drumming, your feet are a very important part of that, and my feet simply didn't work. And up on stage trying to do some drumming, everybody's kind of looking at me like, dude, what are you doing up there? So, but just numbness and pain. The only way to really get rid of the pain is an ice bucket filled with ice water for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm good to go for a little while. So.
Okay. So numbness in the feet is what I'm hearing a lot of. And okay, other experiences that you'd like to share? Right here, Magna.
Good afternoon.
I had a thyroid storm that led to Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I have the pain, the numbness, and the tingling all over my entire body. There's not a specific area that's worse than the other. It's all bad all the time. So for me, I'm a very active person. And in order to stay active and doing the things like volunteering and things like that, I have to not be on medication. So if I stayed on the Lyrica and the Tramadol and all the different ones that I saw on the screen, then you're sleeping 24/7. So the numbness and I think the tingling together has me off balance.
Okay.
Because it seems like a lot of times it's a connection issue when my body's in motion and I'm walking and I'm walking and I'm looking at you and I'm coming over to see you. I have to constantly say, keep moving, keep walking, pick up your legs, go shake hands. But if I look to the left, I just stumble. I would fall before I get to you because I've taken my sight off of where I'm going, and it's kind of like that. So the balance issue is tied into focus, concentration, lift your feet, move your arms, stay, go in one direction. Don't try to do something else while you're going over there because you just lose balance.
Okay. So let's do a show of hands. How many others feel, and sorry, I didn't catch your name. Tanya. I saw some heads nodding while Tanya was speaking. How many others relate to what Tanya just said about having to sort of focus and make sure that you're concentrating on your next step just so you can keep your balance? Okay. Okay. So let me bring us back to this polling question, because what I want to ask is, can you tell us about differences in how you experience the pain, the tingling, the numbness in different parts of your body? So how is it different, for example, in your feet or legs than it is in your hands or arms? Is there a difference between how you experience it in different parts of your body?
My name is Tim. I have a chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, specifically Lewis-Sumner syndrome. And so I have symptoms in all my arms and legs, and they all differ. So with my feet, it's mostly a numbness, maybe some tingling. It's led me to several falls, limited some activity. At its worst, I'll take the elevator instead of the stairs. But my worst symptoms are in my arms, and that's where it had started. And so it's a dull, like somebody hit me with a hammer, pounding. Feels like my right arm is made out of wood. And then the best, in addition to medication, I've had it all, but I'm currently on Motrin and Neurontin and biweekly IVIG treatments. But actually the best thing is exercise as much as I can do it, because the persistent, I like to swim, pounding of the water takes probably 50% of the symptoms away, as long as everything else is working.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Are there other areas that you'd like to share with us before we move on to the next question? Yes.
You asked about diagnosis. I have CIDP too. That's probably why we have such similar symptoms. And the thing about exercises, I went to a physical therapist and I made him realize the importance of letting me do exercises where I didn't have to stand, because they all wanted to make me stand. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I can't stand. I won't stand and do exercises. We need to do them laying down. I need to be able to work every muscle in my body laying down, and it works great.
Okay. Thank you, Beth. Let's take one comment here.
It's sort of a generalized question. Is we're telling all our stories, and so it's experiential. My major question, and well, how's a science writer, is what's it leading toward? What are these seed? What are these individual stories? Where are they leading to in terms of research priorities? What is the status of the research that is going on? What do we need to do about that research as they might apply to our individual problems, because all of it is so individualized. Is there a field theory yet of neuropathy? Some of you know what a field theory is in science. But what are the generalized questions that we need really to know about where things are going? Now, we can tell our stories, on and on and on and on. But where is it leading? And how do we know? How do we keep track of it? Where's the place to go to really go to understanding? Where are other areas of research? By who? Where? Who to talk to if you really have a real question? Stuff like that.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. And I think that's exactly why we're here today, to hear from patients, because you're really the experts. You're the experts in how you're living with the pain and the sensations of pain and numbness and tingling. And I think what you tell us is really important to the work that we do and to the work of drug developers. And as my FDA colleagues identified at the start of the meeting, that's exactly why we're here, is to learn from you so we can move forward with this in drug development. Okay, so I think we have, let me check in with the web really quick, because we're going to move on to the next polling question, which I think is really the bulk of our discussion.
So some of the symptoms that have been mentioned on the web, people having issues with balance and coordination. For people with pain in the face or head region, it's common to also get migraines. Many people mentioned feet issues, such as numbness in their toes, burning feeling, like sunburns, pain in the ankles, or feeling like you're walking on nails. A few people mentioned sleep problems, and there's also mention of Charcot disease, which is a syndrome of bone deformation caused by peripheral neuropathy.
Okay, thank you. And actually, before we go on, I did want to ask one question. Can somebody describe to us what is the difference between numbness and tingling? Or can you describe separately how these terms are different from one another? We've heard burning, shocking pain. We've heard tingling, of course, numbness. Can somebody tell us what's the difference in how you experience it? Can we come to, okay, yes, Tanya. Let's start with Tanya.
Hi. The numbing part of it, I guess, best described is when I put my hand in my bag and I want to pull out lip gloss or a pen or something, I cannot feel it.
Okay.
I can't distinguish what the item is without physically dumping the bag out and looking and say, oh, there it goes. The tingling is like something that's creepy crawling all through under your skin every which way. And you just feel like every nerve end is yelling at you, because it's like, sit down, put a blanket on, warm up, you be still, don't move, because you're hurting so much. So the tingling is just creepy crawly things just all over in you, through you, everywhere.
So tingling is sort of an all-over feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Numbness is maybe more
you
localized.
Cannot distinguish, like feeling. It's like with my hands, I can't distinguish what the item is.
Okay.
With my leg, if you were to squeeze my leg, I can't really tell. I can see you're squeezing it, but I can't initially feel the pressure.
Okay.
Like that.
Okay. Thank you, Tanya. And I think Lou wanted to say something.
The best way I can describe the difference between the numbness and the tingling is the numbness, we've all had the sensation of our feet or legs going to sleep. That's what the numbness feels like to me. You can look at your foot, you can wiggle your toe, and you can't feel that you're wiggling your toe if you're able to do that. And it's the same thing when your foot goes to sleep and you try to bring it back. You move your foot and wiggle your toes, and you can see it, but you can't feel anything. That's kind of how the numbness is for me. The tingling is kind of when your foot does fall asleep and you move it around, and all of a sudden the sensation starts coming back, and you start getting those pins and needles and kind of the tingling feeling as the sensation returns to your foot. Now, I don't get that anymore because my feet are numb, so I don't get the sensation that comes back, but I still get the tingling feeling. So the numbness is sort of like when the foot's asleep. The tingling is sort of like when the sensation is starting to return, and you start to get that first feeling that the sensation's coming back and it starts to tingle. And that's kind of how my numbness and tingling feels.
Okay, so I'm hearing you say that with numbness, it's not that it doesn't go away. It stays numb, whereas the tingling is sort of like an on and off type thing. Okay. Do others feel that same way, or is it different for you? How about
You know, one thing I'd just like to emphasize is that numbness and tingling as words don't sound so bad. You know, it doesn't sound like it's that bad, but it really is bad.
Sure.
It really is painful. It's really uncomfortable, and I wish there was another word that could better describe what we all feel, because I think we know what we all feel.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's take a comment over here. Yeah, sure.
I'm Cherie, and the numbness is like a block, like your foot's it is on, like your foot's a block, but at the same time, numbness is so dangerous. It's like it's having your big toenail ripped off and not knowing it for 10 minutes when you look down and you see the blood. That's numbness. So, I mean, you can really injure yourself because you can't feel what's going on with your feet. Okay. The tingling, it can be like jabs and darts, and that Lyrica commercial that we've all seen with the foot with all the stuff going on all over it. That's the tingling part.
Okay. Okay. Yep. Okay. And do you feel that is there a part of your body where you feel, I know Tanya said tingling was more of an all-over body sensation for her. Is that the same for others, where tingling is more of an all-over sensation? Or do you find that it's more localized for you in a certain area of the body? We have a hand raised up there. We'll just take one comment here, Shannon.
Hi, I'm Evelyn, and I have CIDP. I went into relapse about 3 months ago. And I get the tingling mostly in my hands and my feet, although I have had it in my face. And again, I just want to emphasize it's not mutually exclusive. So when you're numb, you may also be feeling tingling at the same time.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Sharon, right? I hope I got Evelyn, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you, Evelyn. And now let's look to my FDA panel. Sharon, you have a question?
So, by way of background, I'm a neurologist, and I actually was in practice prior to becoming a bureaucrat. And so what I would like to know, I certainly do understand the difference between the numbness and the tingling, the paresthesias, as we would call it, versus the sensory loss or hypoesthesia. You may have heard some of those terms or seen them even in your doctor's notes or in materials that you've read. When you think about treatment, and when we think about what we see coming in for treatment, we tend to see two things that sometimes overlap, but also sometimes are independent of one another. For painful neuropathy, we often will see symptom management. And what typically that refers to is a positive symptom, like the occurrence of these pins and needles, tingling sensations, what I will call painful paresthesias. Sorry, is that better? So we typically see one of two approaches to therapeutics. We see drugs being developed to treat the positive symptoms that you've been describing, predominantly the painful tingling, the painful pins and needles sensations. But we also see people who are, or companies that are interested in what we would call disease-modifying treatment, trying to fix what's wrong with the nerve. And that would try to either slow the development of the numbness or the lack of feeling, or even try to restore it, depending on the nature. If you had to pick what was more important to you, is it more important to decrease the positive symptoms that are associated with pain, or is it more important to try and restore the lost function, the numbness?
So why don't we do this by a show of hands then? So is it more important to, you said the first is decreasing the pain, right? So who thinks, between decreasing the pain and restoring the function, the sensory function. Who thinks decreasing the pain is more important? Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have about 10 hands raised, 11 hands raised. And how about the flip side, which is restoring some of that sensory function? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. About 12. So it seems about the same for both.
You know, I think it's sort of a misleading question, though. It's a wrong question to ask. And the reason I feel that way is because it depends at what level you're experiencing the neuropathy. We have a tremendous amount of people that contact us that have debilitating pain. You know, it affects the way they function and the way they react with people. It just affects their lives overall. It puts them into a deep depression because it's pain all the time. And it's the type of thing that never goes away. And because it never goes away, it may seem tolerable in the very beginning, but over time it gets worse and worse and worse. And at a certain point, some of these people reach a breaking point. And so to ask that question, I think by all means, I think pain is going to be very important in this. To alleviate the numbness, that to me is after the pain is gone. And for those people that are at that level, yeah, that's important. But I think for the people that are out there, there's too many people out there suffering through the pain right now that really need help getting rid of the pain.
Thank you, David. Okay.
I'll just say why I was curious about that piece of the question is because it impacts how the products are developed. Symptom management could be an earlier measurement. Reducing pain can happen quicker because what we know, and I'm sure you all know as well, is trying to see healing of a nerve is an incredibly slow process, and it can take years even in situations where it's possible. So it helps me to know in the context of when they are both present, because I definitely understand the concept of the progression in certain types of neuropathic conditions where early on it's predominantly positive symptoms, and then as the damage progresses, it's more that negative loss of feeling. But when we discuss this with companies that are trying to develop products and we're trying to see what makes sense in terms of staging the clinical study and what to try and get out of the study, it's just helpful to hear some feedback on that.
I think it's a no-brainer on the question. Forgive me for barging in, but yes, you do have to relieve pain. There are products out there that relieve pain now. How many products are out there that actually cure neuropathy? Yeah. I mean, you know, let's get real, because once it's curable, you don't need to worry about the pain.
Yeah, but I don't think there's that many products out there. I think there's a lot of products that will help the pain, but from what I'm hearing back from patients, it doesn't completely alleviate it. And there are too many patients out there that have the pain so severely and they can't get any sort of relief from it. And the other aspect of it is from those drugs that are available to them that they can get some relief, the side effects for some of them are awful. And so it really comes down to, I think, again, it's what situation, where you're at in regards to where you're at in the neuropathy. And the people that suffer from the pain and they're in the severe pain are not here today.
Okay.
You know, I think it's great that Elizabeth made it, but because I know how difficult it was for her to get here. But you're not going to hear from the people that have the really severe pain, you know, as much as you're going to hear from the people that have maybe just the numbness like myself.
Thank you, David. And you're all bringing up some very, very good points, and I want you to hold on to the points on treatments, because we do have the second session really dedicated towards what you're looking for in treatment. So they're all important, and we are going to get to them, I promise you. However, I do want to check in with the web because it sounds like we have some updates coming in from the web. And I know that we have some, to David's point, some people that couldn't travel to come here today joining us on the web. And Adam, I promise I'll come to you right after.
So we have a few people who have called in, but before that we've had a couple comments on numbness and tingling. Some people have described it as a confusing sensation like ants crawling or small cramping localized over the body. Numbness has been described as just having a lack of sensation or feeling in certain body parts or localized tingling. And some people describe tingling as mild to moderate electric shocks.
Okay, thank you. Adam, would you like to?
Yeah, maybe I misinterpreted the question. But the way I interpreted it is almost there's two separate questions there, right? And so I think if you were to break it apart a bit and phrase it as, if we're thinking about priorities, should it be symptom management or figuring out a way to actually alter the underlying disease process? I think you might, and I could be wrong, but I think you might get a different set of answers, because I think for people who have a progressive form of neuropathy, you can treat the symptoms to a degree, but if it's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse, there's only so much you can do. So speaking from my point of view, if you were to phrase the question that way, I would personally say unequivocally that modifying the disease process would be my priority.
Okay, I see some head nods with what you just said, Adam. Thank you.
All right, I think that's really true, because I first chose to stop the progression. I have CIDP. I could stop the progression. We spent a long time doing that, but once the progression was stopped, I don't have any pain relief. So right now, yeah, my brain thinks nothing but pain, pain, pain. You're absolutely right. And when I was first started getting the symptoms, I wanted it to stop progressing. That was the main thing, stop the progression. And if I don't think about just myself and the pain that I live with, yes, I would want them to stop the progression and be able to stop the progression for anybody that it happens to.
Okay, thank you very much, Beth. Leslie, you have been waiting very patiently. Can we bring a microphone over to Leslie?
I think I've been on both sides of this. I have autoimmune small fiber. It took 3 years to get that diagnosis. But when my neuropathy came on, it came on quite quickly, and I went from being a high-functioning professional to being on disability, practically unable to do anything. It felt like I was having a blowtorch applied to first my feet, but then it went up my legs and then my arms and hands. And I don't know how long I could have taken it. None of the drugs worked except for opiates, and my doctor, I wouldn't have stood it for 3 years without that. And there's a lot of people now with the opiate issues that can't get that. For the last 7 years, I've run a support group for neuropathy patients of about 60 people. And the people who are in this level of pain can't get to the group very often, and they usually drop out because they end up not being able to leave their homes. They can't drive. They can't function. I was in that status, and finally I got on IVIG, and my symptoms largely went away. And it was my life back. People are paralyzed by depression after being in this level of pain for very long. It pickles your brain. I won't go into all the effects on my life, but it was devastating, and it was agony. And I can understand why some people commit suicide because of this. And so I'm on both sides of this issue. The pain control, when you're in that level of pain, you can't go on without it. But the disease modifying, where all of a sudden you don't need the pain control, is definitely worth research dollars, of which neuropathy gets very few.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Let's do a polling question. Sounds like your comments really resonated with a lot of people in the room. So let's do a quick polling question, if we could get our clickers out again. How do your neuropathic pain symptoms typically manifest? A, pain appears suddenly and progresses rapidly. B, pain appears subtly and progresses slowly. C, pain comes and goes. D, pain is continuous. E, pain worsens over time. F, other manifestation not mentioned, or G, I don't know. Okay, so it looks like we have, the majority of people said that pain is continuous, which you all highlighted early on when I asked how many of you are actually in pain right now. Many of you said you are. So pain is continuous, and C, pain comes and goes. And we also have pain worsens over time and other manifestation not mentioned. So whoever answered that, I definitely want to encourage you to share your comments. So on this note, what I'd like to ask is, some of you have described, and I know that even some of you that provided your comments and so forth mentioned that sometimes you experience a flare-up or a time when your pain is significantly worse than your average day of pain. So I don't know if that's the right word to describe it, and I want you to tell us if flare-up is the right word to describe it. But can you share with us what an average day of experiencing the pain or the tingling or the numbness, what that is, and then what your really worst, what it feels like on your worst day? Is there a flare-up, and what does that feel like? So we have Lou, and then we have...
The way I describe, my pain's constant. It never goes away totally. But the way I describe my pain is that it's as if you're in a room and somebody comes in and turns on a radio at a kind of a low volume. When they first turn it on, you hear the radio. But after a while, you don't really pay that much attention to the radio anymore. So a good day for me is the pain's there, but it doesn't get my attention all that much. I go through my day, I do what I need to do. On a bad day when there's a flare, it's as if then somebody turns the radio up as high as it'll go. And now all you can hear is that radio. And so the pain becomes really, a kind of a focus of my day when it's that bad. I really can't focus on other things because the pain is just so severe that it really kind of takes over my consciousness at that point. So that's kind of the way I experience the flares. And by the way, when we talk about pain and we talk about the symptoms that we get, my pain isn't just different day to day. It's different moment to moment. It is never exactly the same. It becomes greater in intensity, it becomes lesser in intensity, it moves to other parts of my body. The sensations themselves go from stinging to perhaps then stabbing, and burning. It never is exactly the same from moment to moment. But when there's a flare, that's what I call them. I call them flares. When there's a flare, it's as if somebody just turns the volume up on the pain way up, and I become much more consciously aware of it.
And is it a certain aspect, like you mentioned stinging, shocking, when you're having a flare, is it which one of those is worsening, or is it all of those worsening?
It becomes, instead of a kind of a stinging, a tingling, it becomes more of a stabbing type of a pain. It's as if when it's at its worst, it feels like somebody plunges a knife into my leg and just drags it down my leg. It's much more focused in a certain area than the kind of generalized stinging and tingling that I usually get. It'll feel like somebody's pounding spikes into my feet. That sort of thing, and that's how I describe the difference between a flare and just the normal stinging and tingling that I have pretty much all the time.
Okay, thank you, Lou. Sharon, I know you had a question.
We're hearing a lot of similar descriptions or spectrum for the painful type of symptoms. And one of the things that we try to do in clinical trials is have a consistent endpoint to measure so that we can tell if the drug is working. And because there are many terms associated with the pain that is experienced with painful neuropathies, it's challenging to know what is the right question to ask so that the effects can be measured. So, what I'm hearing, for instance, with this last gentleman is that when the pain intensity changes, there may be, and this is, I'm not sure if I'm hearing one or the other, either just a much greater intensity that goes from a pin to a knife, or does it actually change in quality? And I think what's important about that is hearing that kind of feedback. If you were to be asked to keep a diary every day as part of a pain study, what is your experience of trying to rate we usually ask for, like, if you have multiple symptoms, what is the most bothersome symptom, and how would you anticipate trying to rate that over time to see if perhaps a new medicine was working?
Well, I do agree that this pain can be very difficult to describe. I mean, there are times when I have sensations that I really can't describe to other people, and it would be very difficult and maybe even misleading for me to try and do that. But in terms of a pain diary, I think that I would obviously describe the differences in the intensity of the pain, and not so much the location, because I can get it anywhere, but more the intensity of the pain. And it seems when I get a flare that the pain becomes much more perceived in a certain, in more of a limited area. I mean, usually I have pain and numbness all over, but I'll start to get it, for instance, for some reason on the outside of my right foot. It'll just feel like somebody's pounding a nail into that over and over and over again, just in that one location. And I may never have felt pain like that ever in that location before. I may never feel it in that location again. But it's just at that point, that's what I perceive. And that to me is something that I'm sure I could catalog in some sort of a diary and indicate where I'm getting it. And it doesn't seem so much the location. It just seems more of the change in the nature of the pain that indicates a flare-up for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Graham, I'm going to look to you. How many people do we have that want to dial in? We're technically right into our break time, so if you don't mind, can we take a few minutes of break just to hear a few more comments, and then we'll get right back on track? Okay, so can we take one caller from...
Yes, the first comment or question in the queue is from Eugene. Your line is now open.
Yes. Hi, I'm Colonel Eugene Richardson, retired from the U.S. Army. I have CIDP due to exposure to Agent Orange, and I would be there today, except I'm in a wheelchair most of the time. And I wanted to share about the numbness. If I walk more than 10 feet and attempts to walk, I eventually become so numb I will collapse and then become so exhausted I must go to sleep. My legs are just basically gone, even though I am on IVIG, but I didn't get that until maybe 35 years after I was exposed and had symptoms. And I'm grateful for IVIG because otherwise I wouldn't be here talking to you. But I am grateful for what you're doing and the work of the FDA. I remember that nortriptyline was the only drug that helped me. The others I ended up talking to myself in the closet, which was not good. But nortriptyline, until I got my IVIG started, which I get every 3 weeks, go to the hospital, get it. And that's a godsend, but it's not 100%. It's not a cure. And to answer that, doctor, I would love to have healing of the nerves. Don't know whether that's realistic because I'm 77 now, but would love to have the healing. And I'm fortunate now, even though I've had hellish pains all over my body, including screwdrivers being pushed out of my fingers, I don't have quite as much pain anymore. I think maybe because the nerves are pretty kind of damaged, but I'm grateful for IVIG because that keeps me going every 21 days. But I just want to thank all of you for what you're doing today. God bless.
Thank you, Eugene. There were a lot of heads nodding, and I hope you heard and are seeing on the webcast that we're clapping for you for sharing that that personal story with us. So thank you very much. And do we have, Graham? Do we have a few more polling questions, or is that it? Okay. So as I mentioned, we are right into break time, and just so we stay on time, what I'd like to do is at least get your responses to the polling questions so we capture those perspectives. And we'll come back right after break time to dive into more detail about treatments. So if you could get your clickers out, and we did talk about this a bit, but just to sort of, I suppose, revalidate it. What terms best describe the most bothersome aspects of your neuropathic pain? And you can choose up to 3 terms. Numbness, B, tingling, C, burning, D, stabbing or shooting pain, E, prickling, pins and needles, F, electric shocks, or G, others not mentioned. Okay, a nice widespread here, from numbness to others not mentioned. Okay, I see a little bit of everything except for the electric shocks, and then we do see a lot of others not mentioned. Can we quickly have somebody share, if you identified others not mentioned, can you share with us what you meant by that? Aching.
Aching, which
Okay.
is not there.
Okay, thank you. And your name?
Mary.
Mary. Thank you, Mary. Anybody else? Did you select others not mentioned? Yes. Cramping. Okay. Do others experience cramping? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm seeing about 7, 8 hands raised. Okay. Anybody else? Other symptoms or other manifestations not mentioned? Okay. I think we have one more polling question. Okay. What are the most bothersome impacts of your neuropathic pain on your daily life? A, ability to participate or perform activities. B, ability to fall asleep at night. C, ability to sleep through the night. D, ability to concentrate or stay focused. E, ability to care for self, family, or others. F, impacts on sexual intimacy. G, emotional impacts, such as fear or hopelessness. And H, other impacts not mentioned. And you can choose up to 3. All of the above. Okay. If we had an all of the above, would you select that? How many of you would select that? Okay, so we had about 5 hands raised for that. And okay. Okay, so once again, a widespread, let's see here, really everything. And it looks like we sort of captured these biggest buckets of impacts. And on the web?
70% said ability to participate or perform activities, and 50% emotional activities or ability to fall and stay asleep.
Okay, thank you. All right, so before we go to break, FDA panel, are there any final questions that you'd like to ask? I know it's impossible to cover everything that you're feeling about how you experience the sensations of neuropathic pain and other sensations in this time frame, but we thank you for what you've contributed. FDA, any final questions? Okay. All right, so let's take a, shall we say, 5-minute break or 10-minute break? Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll be right back.